Unit 4, Video 1, Photosynthesis. Our objective for this particular video is to be able to compare and contrast photosynthesis and cell respiration. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe in general the steps of the light reactions and the dark reactions of photosynthesis. Where does photosynthesis happen? It will happen in two different photosystems. There are the light-dependent reactions and the light-independent reactions, and this is going to occur in the chloroplasts, the little green things inside of plant cells. Chloroplasts contain pigments, one of which is chlorophyll. Pigments absorb and transmit certain wavelengths of light, and chlorophyll will absorb light in the red and blue portion of the spectrum and reflect the green. In plants, the main pigment that is involved in photosynthesis is chlorophyll. So here we see a spectrum reading of different chlorophylls, and you will see in the blue and red we have a spike, but in the green, yellow, and orange we have a lower reading. This is due to the fact that we are absorbing these and we are reflecting these colors. So the structure of a chloroplast. These are found inside of plant cells. They are double membraned, meaning they have two folded membranes. And inside of them they have thylakoids and granum. The thylakoid is what looks like a coin. The granum is a stack of those thylakoids. It is composed of an outer membrane, an inner membrane, a thylakoid, the granum, which is a stack of thylakoids, and the stroma. So, photosynthesis. So the equation for photosynthesis is water plus carbon dioxide and light will yield sugar, carbohydrate, and oxygen. So our reactants, the things that we put into it, are water, carbon dioxide, and light. The products, what we get out of it, will be sugar and oxygen. So, to simplify it in words, it would be water and carbon dioxide plus light yield sugar and oxygen. The light reactions. They are so named because they require light to function and are activated by light. The first thing we need to know is that in the light reactions we are producing ATP. ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is the power or energy molecule that we find in our cells. And we can equate it to being like a battery. We are making ATP in the light reactions, so we are charging our battery. The form that we currently have it in is ADP, which means it's lacking a phosphate, and it's a partially charged battery. So there's some energy, but not as much as we need. So we're going to be making the fully charged version of it in the light reactions. So from the chloroplast, here's an overview of the photosynthetic process. We are going to have CO2 and water that come into the chloroplast plus light energy, and coming out of it we will get sugars and oxygen. So the first part that we're going to focus on is the light reactions, which you'll see in the brown box over here. Then we'll focus on the dark reactions, or the light independent reactions, called the Calvin cycle. Alright, so the first step, the light reactions. We need light to start this whole process. It begins when photons hit photosystem 2, and it's called photosystem 2 because it was the second one that we found, but it's the first one that is actually activated. Photons are just little particles of light. The light will actually excite the electrons and get them all happy, and these very excited electrons are then passed on through the electron transport chain. As these electrons are used, they are replaced within the system, and our electron carriers are things that will carry the electrons from one place to another. They're hyped up on sugar and they need to be transported somewhere else, and they need some help to get there. Certain compounds can carry these electrons, and a carrier is just one that can accept a pair of highly energy electrons and transfer them along with their energy to another molecule. The main ones that we use in photosynthesis are NADP plus and ADP, which will make NADPH and ATP. So, the light reactions. In general, light will come in along with water, and we will excite some electrons and split the water, release the oxygen, and use the electrons and hydrogen from the water in the electron transport chain. As it comes down the electron transport chain, it will make ATP, more light will come in, and then we'll send some more electrons on to our primary acceptor, which in this case is NADP. And here is what that process would look like. So it comes up, it's going to come down the electron transport chain, we make ATP, and then it goes on to the NADP. And again, the product from this portion of the cycle is oxygen, ATP, NADPH, and we have brought in light and water. So far, that is what we have done. So, electrons that have been excited by photosystem 2 move through the electron transport chain to photosystem 1. The molecules in the ETC use the energy to transport hydrogen ions across the stroma to the inner thylakoid in the chloroplast. And these high energy electrons now move through the ETC from photosystem 2 to photosystem 1. And we use this to push hydrogen ions across the membrane into the thylakoid. And we use pigments to re-energize the electrons. NADPP plus picks these electrons up with the hydrogen plus ions, and after a while the inner membrane contains positively charged hydrogen ions and enough that we can make ATP because we have a membrane differential. So we have to have ATP synthase, which is on the ETC. It's an integral protein in the membrane, and it works like a turnstile to produce the ATP, and as it rotates it binds a phosphate to the ADP. So you have ADP, a phosphate, you bring through a hydrogen, turns the turnstile, click, phosphate's on, happy-go-lucky, it goes off as ATP. It's a fully charged battery. So here again is the process. Bring in the light, split water, electrons go down the chain, we build up that hydrogen ion concentration, more excitement, and we make NADP plus with hydrogen. Alright, so in summary, that was a lot of biochemistry for you to absorb. I know that. So let's just sum it all up. Light enters and excites the photosystem. Water enters and is split into hydrogen ions and oxygen. The oxygen leaves the system. ATP and NADPH are made to be used in the Calvin cycle, and we go into the Calvin cycle. So again, light enters, water enters, ADP and NADPH enter. What leaves is oxygen, ATP, and NADPH. So the dark reactions, or the Calvin cycle, are going to use the ATP and NADPH that we made in the light reactions to help us make the sugars. So, ATP and NADPH formed in the light reactions contain energy. It's trapped in the bonds between the elements. So, in the Calvin cycle, we use that energy to build the compounds that store energy for a long time, our sugars. So, we are making carbohydrates. This does not require light to function, and it will happen in 4 stages. We will make 6 carbon dioxide molecules will enter from the atmosphere and bond with 5 carbon molecules, and we convert them into higher energy forms in the form of glucose. So we have 2 3 carbon molecules that are removed and converted into sugar. The others are reused in the cycle. The Calvin cycle, very simply, bring in ATP and NADPH, let out NADP plus ADP and phosphate, and glucose. We also bring in carbon dioxide. So, summary of the Calvin cycle. ATP and NADPH from the light reactions enter. ADP and NADP leave the reactions to be used again. Carbon dioxide enters after cycling through the Calvin cycle. Glucose is synthesized for use. And here's an overview of photosynthesis. Water and light enter the light reactions and oxygen. Then, carbon dioxide, ATP, and NADPH enter the Calvin cycle, and sugars, NADP+, ADP, and phosphate are released. Pretty simple. If you learn anything about photosynthesis, it would be this one slide. What enters and leaves the entire reaction. It's happening in the chloroplast, using chlorophyll and those pigments to help us make sugars through this biochemical process. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and do not forget to whisk.